Welcome back. Well, let's focus on Daru then, because we had Ms. Madhu Kela who joined us earlier in the week, and he made a couple of points, both on Dawa, that's pharma, as well as on Daru. Let's talk about Daru. He seems to be quite bullish on India's Alco Bev industry. And one factor that he put out was that Motai, which is a Chinese company, their profitability is equal to 25 times all the Indian companies' profitability put it together. So Motai currently does around $12.5 billion of profitability, while the Indian companies altogether, they do $500 million also. So there's a big gap out there. And Motai themselves, 15 years ago, their profitability itself was only $500 million, which has moved up to around $12.5 billion on. So let's make a point out there. It appears that there is a big penetration scope here in the Indian alcohol beverage industry. So a few factors that come up for you on the screen. One is the Indian industry itself is one of the fastest growing. In terms of volumes, we're third after China as well as the United States. And just take a look at the graph. In trillion, we should be at around 5 trillion rupees of the total industry. That comes from around 1.5 trillion just a few years or so ago. Next up, moving to the per capita consumption, even of beer. India is lagging behind. I'm doing my bit, but in fact, we are lagging big time. India, in comparison to what the globe is doing, the consumption really needs to catch up on the beer front. That's point number one, tremendous potential in India. Point number two, state governments. They seem to be making steps in the right direction. Case in point being the UP government. They introduced the liquor policy in 2018. And from there, if you look at it, well, you saw the sales move up of all the organized players. That monopoly that was there in terms of distribution, that got taken out. And just take a look at the excise revenues for the state. That moved up. And they set a good example. The Andhra Pradesh government as well has implemented the liquor policy, and they are talking about giving good quality alcohol at reasonable prices. So we'll see how that goes. But they've set a bit of a trend, and hopefully most of the other state governments could also follow, which in turn will be very, very good news for the organized industry. Premiumization, that seems to be taking center stage as well. And in the last few years, if you look at the premiumization, both of a couple of companies, one is United Spirits and the other one is Radico. Premiumization as a percentage of the total mix, well, it's moved up drastically, for both of them. And it's not just consume premium alcohol, consume more amount of Indian single malt. I think that graph should come up for you because earlier, single malt was being consumed, but the foreign single malt was consumed more than the Indian single malt. However, now the Indian single malt that's being consumed is more than the imported single malt as well. Next, currently we're in this wedding season, and the number of weddings itself, the number of days are higher, the spending is more as well, and people want to consume premium. So young couples as well, they have a lot of focus on the bar, which in turn will result in a lot of consumption. And, finally, margins. If you're looking at the gross margins in the last few years, of some of these frontline names, you have seen a contraction in margins, of all these three names. But DAM Capital, they put on a note, they are talking about margin expansion of around 250 basis points approximately, because input costs are well behaved, glass prices are okay, and the premiumization theme will drive the realizations as well. So they're expecting improvement from there on. Finally, the valuation picture comes up for you on the screen. So it seems, as Ms. Madhu Kela said, there's tremendous potential here in India for these Alco Bev companies. And it seems there are a lot of triggers and tailwinds as well for them. Well, Harish, let's come across to you. Let me get your view on this. There is a lot of potential. Some of these stocks have seen a decent run as well. But penetration's improving, premiumization's there, and input costs well behaved. What's your view on the sector?
We are reasonably extremely positive on this space as well. In fact, in many of our schemes, wherever we have FMCG or consumer staples exposure, but you will find only Alco Bev, as representative of that FMCG share. Now, part of the reason why we've been positive on Alco Bev, apart from all the reasons that you mentioned, is that generally there is a lag between price hikes that various state governments give and the cost increases that all these companies suffer from. Now, what we had seen, and as I think one of your graphics also showed, premiumization has moved up meaningfully between FY19 and FY24, and yet gross margins have come off so significantly between that same time frame because energy costs had gone up, glass costs had gone up, barley costs had gone up, the input raw materials had gone up significantly. And state governments typically take a reasonable amount of time to give through those price hikes. Do remember that in most states in India, it is an administered price for it's not a free market in the sense like all FMCG, wherein prices can be set by the manufacturer, etc. So therefore, there has generally been a lead and lag, and we do think that now raw materials being better behaved, we do think we've already seen some states give that. We see more and more states giving a higher price rise, which means that we're going to see some of that clawback of that margins. So continue to believe that this can be a very good space wherein we get to experience reasonably rational policy making also. To this policy making, we've also seen, for example, some state governments being open to even e-commerce delivery. Again, this entire space of Alco Bev has been very, very restricted in terms of media, in terms of distribution outlets, etc. And therefore, it's refreshing to see the various governments and policymakers having a slightly open mind to see how they can both maximize their revenues as well as improve the overall usage of these industries.
Harish, thank you very much for joining us today. We're all going to dive into our weekend. You enjoy yours too, but keep it with CNBC TV 18 for more news and updates.